by Brown. Gets it off to Versafi.
A couple times they have left that shot open on that side of the court.
Brown, a chance to tie at the line.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenauer and Sean Myers.
We welcome you into another playoff edition of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. I'm Sean Myers, joined by Jack Ridenauer. Jack, as always, a very quick-paced show, and we got a lot to get to with all these playoff happenings from the week that was, and a very big week ahead as well. We'll also have our plays of the week, our team of the week, which is the Greensburg Central Catholic Centurions girls, and a look ahead at semifinals, consolation, and championship action in Westmoreland County. That's right. We already know two teams that will be playing for WPIAL Gold. Well, one of those teams that still could be is the Jeannette Jayhawks boys as we begin our starting five takeaways, the biggest stories from this past week. And they, I think, were the biggest story, Jack, or certainly one of them, because they pulled off a comeback for the ages, and you had a front row seat to it. A stunning come-from-behind win against Our Lady of the Sacred Heart to keep their championship hopes alive. They're now on to the semifinals.
An unbelievable game. Just truly, you want to talk about playoff basketball, and it was that game. I mean, it was a 16-point Ulsh lead with about maybe 2.5 minutes to go in the third quarter. And I remember talking with Anthony D'Annunzio, who I did the game with, and we both kind of looked at each other like, this might get ugly very quickly, because it was kind of teetering into that danger zone. And then all of a sudden, something kind of clicks. I don't know what it was, but Jeannette started getting a couple stops, and then they started getting a couple steals. And then you kind of felt the momentum building up. Ulsh missed 3, 4, maybe 5 straight shots. I mean, they were some good shots, but they just couldn't get anything to go, and they couldn't miss in the first half. I mean, they made a buzzer beater three-pointer to before the end of the half, in the first half, at the end of the second quarter. And you felt like that was going to be all the momentum going their way. And again, it just was Jeannette kind of finding their way out of these sticky situations. Kamani Brown was unbelievable. I mean, I felt like everything kind of was ignited from his play. Jace Powell started to feed off of that. He had some big buckets in the second half. But really, I felt the game completely changed when Lonnie Green started to get inserted into the mix. Van Cavels, Ulsh's big man, he was dominant to start. And Jeannette, as Sean, you and I have seen, they don't have a ton of size, but Lonnie Green provided some great physicality, obviously gave up a couple inches in height, but his physicality, it just was enough of a bother for Cavels that it didn't make anything easy for him. And you just felt all the momentum going their way. And then surely, it was Jace Powell getting a big bucket, Kamani Brown getting a big bucket, and then all of a sudden they win. And I remember kind of looking up and being like, how did this happen? I mean, this was looking at a blowout with less than 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. An incredible job by Jeannette. And truly, I think one of the best games that we've seen probably on the network all season long.
The high school level, sometimes things happen like that when it's a team that maybe is a little overwhelmed by the moment in terms of like they have the opportunity to pull off an upset, but it's so tough to close it out because they haven't been through it before. It's a program that maybe isn't have a great lineage in basketball. But that's not the case with Our Lady of the Sacred Heart and with their head coach, because the program is as decorated as just about any in the entire WPIAL. Mike Rodriguez has been as successful as any coach in the WPIAL. Now, maybe it is like 3 years removed from their finest seasons, but you don't see a team like Our Lady of the Sacred Heart squander a lead like that in the playoffs. And I think it's more a testament to Jeannette than any sort of shortcoming by the Chargers.
Absolutely. And I think it was the fact that, I was even mentioning that on air, was that this is a team that's been around the block like this before. They've been in these situations, especially in 2A, right? I mean, they just moved down from 3A to 2A from last year.
They have the longest winning streak in Pennsylvania high school basketball history, and that happened recently.
Yeah, about 2 years ago. Actually, no, it ended, about 2 years ago. So I think they went to 7 straight WPIAL championships, something incredible like that. So they're truly, it was a dynasty that they built. And the fact that Jeannette kind of came in and, and I know we'll get to it, but with GCC losing, And it felt like with this coming into this year, I don't mean to get ahead of myself, but with Aliquippa being out of 2A, it really felt like this was going to be GCC's year. Now with GCC out of the equation, Ulsh out of the equation, I mean, Jeannette gets through Swickley Academy. I don't see why the Jayhawks can't win with all of the leadership that they've got. And not to mention, these are players that have played a lot of big-time football. They've carried that over to basketball, and they are showing no signs of crumbling in the biggest moment.
Well, you mentioned GCC, Jack. It was a surprising outcome, to say the least. The Centurions, the number one seed, and not just number one seed, but I think most people from the start of this season thought they were the favorite to win a WPIAL title, something they had never done, believe it or not, as great as that program has been for decades. But they could not get past the very pesky Union Scotties. And to me, this was a game where it did not look like GCC basketball, especially in the second half. Union went with a zone that really got the Centurions out of their rhythm. And I think they kind of played into the Scotties' hand. And Lucas Stanley, the son of the head coach for Union and their star player, coming off of a 36-point outburst, they double teamed him, often triple teamed him. They face guarded him. They denied him the basketball. So he got very few touches, but an offensive rebound late in the game. He was open behind the arc. They kicked it out to him. You know, that's the best time to shoot a three-pointer. He knocked it down and turned out to be the winning points. Just heartbreaking for GCC. Season's not over. They've already rebounded with a nice consolation game win. I think they might make some noise in the States, but even if they do, I still don't know that it's going to undo the hurt that they felt after a game like that. One where they were going against an 8 seed, and they just could not find a way to score the basketball late when they needed to.
Like I said, with Aliquippa not being in 2A this year, we felt like this was going to be the season that GCC could make a true, legitimate run at a championship and win a championship. And I think that the biggest thing that hurt GCC in this game was the physicality of Union. And I was reading the article, Coach Highland was quoted mentioning that he was surprised, and really the whole team was surprised by the physicality that Union possessed. And I mean, it showed in the rebounding column, 38-22, GCC was out rebounded. So,
by the way, I think those numbers are courtesy of our Greg Bizignani. I believe Ducky might have borrowed those from him. Maybe he did it on his own, but I know Greg keeps that as well. And that was his recurring point, is that Union so many times won the physical battle and got so many offensive rebounds, including the one we mentioned that turned out to be kind of the decisive play of the game.
When you win the offensive battle, it's just more possessions, more chances that you get at scoring and the other team doesn't get at scoring. And then especially like we know in high school basketball, and there's no shot clock, that's valuable time that you're losing and that you're not going to have an opportunity at. You get a long defensive possession, a missed shot, and then an offensive rebound, then you might be playing another minute's worth of defense. So it could be an uphill battle, and that's exactly what happened with GCC.
Again, their season's not over, but their championship hopes in the WPIAL come to an end much, much earlier than expected. Well, a team that maintains its championship hopes and will be playing for gold down at the Pete, the Belle Vernon area Leopards boys, and what a story this has become. My, oh my, did they have to eke out a victory, 57-56 against Avonworth. A terrific matchup. I'm going to be honest. I thought that maybe Avonworth was a bad matchup for Belle Vernon. Avonworth has maybe the most prolific scorer in all of WPL boys basketball. But the Leopards found a way. It came down to very late second foul shots. Tommy Davis hit one that gave him the win. Trevor Kovac had a big performance for them. And if nothing else, I know the players are the ones who deserve the vast majority of the credit, but it also feels like a Joe Salvino postseason for the Leopards, because he already said this is it. This is his swan song. We know the second winningest coach in terms of career victories in all of the WPIAL. And now he gets to coach in a championship and try to guide their Leopards to their first championship since 1978, which, I mean, it would be no better ending for a legendary coach.
Truly, I mean, it would be storybook ending. And I think that would be, I would say, the biggest thing that's motivating, obviously outside of winning a championship in general, but having a championship for your head coach in his final season and send him out in that way, that's got to be the biggest thing motivating this group right now. And you mentioned Trevor Kovac and Tommy Davis. They were huge down the stretch, especially in the second half. It looked like it was going to be Avonworth running away with it. I think it was about an 8-point lead for Avonworth down the stretch. And then Trevor Kovac scores 6 straight points. He had 14 of his 17 in the second half. When you're getting that type of production, and I was looking at something on Twitter, looked like Zion Moore was a little hobbled in warmups. I believe that he was banged up in the game prior. So you
He
come
didn't have
into
a big
it.
scoring game by his standards.
Right. And I know that most of the scoring was done early in the game. So thinking of, maybe hobbled in an injury, game went on, got a little bit fatigued, that, whatever was bothering him started to wear down as well. And so you had other guys step up. And in a situation, in a season like this, for Belle Vernon, especially when you're trying to, send your head coach out on a championship run, you're going to have other guys step up. And I know that we'll get to some other teams in a little bit here that have had some other players step up. And that's the difference in making a big run in the playoffs, Sean. I mean, if you can have that third option, we talked about Zion Moore all season long. He's one of the best players in the district. And then Trevor Kovac has been great as well. But Tommy Davis has kind of been that third, maybe sometimes fourth guy that is in the mix there. And again,
Curdy Wade's another guy that's made an impact. Dom Galani.
And you've got guys that, are kind of those third, fourth, fifth options that are now making big plays. And again, I mean, this kind of feels like it's very similar to the Jeannette. They have this aura around them right now. Everything is going their way. And I don't see how, I know that they've got a big task against North Catholic, but I mean, this Belle Vernon team's going to carry a lot of momentum, and they're going to have a lot of people down at the Peta, place that hasn't seen a championship win since the 70s. The place is going to be slammed on. Is it Thursday or Friday they play Thursday? It's going to be slammed. Yeah, have fun trying to find parking downtown.
Yeah, Rowan Carmichael was that star player for Avonworth. His dad's a college coach in the area, and he's one of the best scorers, 2,000 plus points in his career, much like Zion Moore. I believe he was leading the WPIAL boys basketball in scoring average this season. He got his, but ultimately it was the Leopards who got the last word. And I will say this as well, Jack. If Belle Vernon wins a championship against a team somewhat ironically led by a former Westmoreland County head coach in Jim Rocco with North Catholic that had a mercy rule victory in the semis, man, the Trojans are rolling. If Coach Salvino and the Leopards win a championship, I think that will be the biggest story of the entire 3 days to Pete. There's 12 championship games. Some of them always have great storylines, and it's not the biggest classification in 4A, but I think that will be the number one story that comes out of the 3 days is if Salvino guides the Leopards to their first title since 78 in his final season as a head coach.
I would say so. I would say that, you could maybe put Norwin girls in that category if they get to the championship, kind of how they were still able to overcome all the loss that they had. Again, if they were to get to the championship, still have a semifinals game to be played. But yeah, I mean, right now, I would say Belle Vernon would be kind of that headlining story. Maybe, and I know we'll get to GCC girls here in a little bit, but maybe GCC girls, especially with how they've lost to Shadyside Academy 2 previous times and they're running into them again. So, but the fact that it's the final season of such an illustrious head coach, absolutely, if Belle Vernon wins one. And again, the third time they've ever been there, first win they would have in the title since the 70s. Yeah, this would be a story for the ages, a team that would go down in history for Belle Vernon.
Yeah, they reached the championship under Salvino with Devin Whitlock and crew, but could not get over the hump. Well, they'll try to do that this upcoming week. Well, a team that won't have a chance at a championship, somewhat surprisingly, the Penn-Trafford girls, and we saw them a lot this season, Jack. They were undefeated through the regular season. There were some questions. Did they get a kind of a raw deal with the seeding? They got the 3 seed, which meant they had to play number 6 Thomas Jefferson, and it was the Jaguars who stunned them in overtime. I think most people realized TJ was a really, really good team. We talked about the difference between playing TJ versus Indiana. If you are Penn-Trafford, unfortunately, it was ultimately the Jaguars who won this one. PT made a good run to get it to overtime. They scored the final 9 points of regulation, but just could not put it away in the extra period. So undefeated regular season for naught. Their season continues as well, but it felt like this was the year they were poised to maybe make a championship run.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing, though, from this is that there are still so many things that this group accomplished that, I think coming into the year, people probably felt they were going to do a lot of good things. They would be very successful. They would win a lot of games. I don't think anybody saw an undefeated regular season, right? No chance. And so I think championship or not, going undefeated for a whole regular season, there should be some sort of accomplishment in that in itself. I mean, just think about that, right? You go 22-0. It's hard to go 10-0. It's hard to do 5 straight wins, let alone, okay? 22 straight wins is incredible. And this was a TJ team, I was reading a lot of things. It felt like coming into it, first off, I was reading something Coach Jeannette mentioned. It did not feel like TJ was a 6 seed. So that, you want to play that game of the seeding. Is Thomas Jefferson really a 6 seed?
Maybe they were the 4th best team this season. I mean,
exactly.
I still think everyone would say South Fayette, Peters Township, Penn-Trafford, and then probably a little bit of a drop off. But I think Thomas Jefferson maybe would be that 4th team potentially.
And I think the biggest thing in this win that's so incredible for TJ was that their star player, Maggie Speld, who guided Shadyside Academy, who's also in a championship as well, to a title last year, she did not play in the overtime. So, she fouled out of in regulation. So that was also something that was incredible that the Jaguars were able to overcome now granted, Penn-Trafford had Cameron Piper also foul out. So you did kind of have maybe 1-for-1 there. But still, I mean, this was, and I was reading an article that mentioned, I think TJ, I don't think they had a JV team. I think it's simply just varsity. And so you have
10 girls, I believe.
Smaller roster. And you got to think too, Sean, throughout the year, I'm sure they've got that mentality of, hey, it's David versus Goliath. Why not us? And when you've got that mentality and you ride that all year long and you're a very talented team like TJ is, I don't want to say I am not shocked by Penn-Trafford losing, but it's not the biggest surprise, I guess, because of, again, the matchup that they drew. And again, you go back to the seeding aspect of it. But what an unbelievable season for Penn-Trafford. I know that they still have consolation basketball left, so their season's still alive, obviously, but just an unbelievable season that the Warriors had nonetheless.
Lastly, for our starting 5 takeaways, the Norwin Knights girls, they had a long wait. That's the case in 6A, and they went against a very familiar opponent, their rivals, North Allegheny. This year was not in the championship or in the WPIAL semis. It was in the opening round, which is the quarterfinals, and the Knights took care of business. They went against the number 8 seed. It's rare and kind of unusual to see NA in that spot, but the Knights looked the part of a number 1 seed. They put the clamps down defensively. Second and third quarters combined, they allowed 7 points, and they got a plenty offense from Belle Vernon, who was just red hot from behind the arc. She hit 6 3-pointers, 18 points total in the game. As a result, Norwin kind of cruises to a victory, and their section goes 4 for 4 in the quarterfinals. They represent all 4 of the semifinalists now, so certainly they are battle-tested playing the rigors of that section schedule.
And it's, once again, the Norwin defense. I mean, how many times have we talked about this Knights defense, and they come to life at the perfect time of season? It always seems that they're a playoff-oriented team. Coach Brzezinski knows how to play or how to coach in this type of season, in this type of environment as well. For Norwin, I don't want to say, I think what's so impressive about them, and again, not necessarily shocking, but I think what's been a pleasant surprise maybe is the fact that, again, they lost a lot. And they did bring back still a good bit of players that had some roles on the team last year, right? You look at Ava Christopher, she had a big role. You look at Belle Vernon, had a big role. Obviously, Kendall Berger and Avery Brzezinski. But you lost still a lot. And
I thought Pelangio maybe was the best player that I saw last year in the WPIAL on the girls' side. Now, there's some others. Obviously, we saw Emma Paul go insane in the championship game. But yeah, I thought Pelangio was as good as it got.
And Bailey Snowberger was the glue of it all. I mean, having a point guard that is willing to take on the role that she took on, pass first, sacrificing her own shots, play good defense, being a leader. There's not many players.
You see PAC basketball and
yeah,
at Allegheny College.
Yeah, Ava Kobus is doing a great job at Allegheny, and she was fantastic for them last year in the championship run. So again, this was a team that, I think a lot of people kind of, I don't want to say wrote off, but people were like, oh, it's going to be a hard journey for them. And it has not been easy, right? We go back to Upper St. Clair, that game at home, and that was one I'm sure that they've burned the film of. But at the end of the day, they're one game away from going back to the championship, and it's just a team and a program that it's covered and winning is ingrained in it. So they just know how to get back to the title game.
They were actually trailing after the first quarter. Not that really matters in the end, but even when they were trailing, They were playing great defense. They were racking up the steals. They just didn't capitalize on the offensive end. But I think Kendall Berger might have had 5 steals in the first quarter alone. So they were just creating havoc all night long en route to that victory against their old rivals in the North Allegheny Tigers. That'll do it for our starting 5 takeaways. It's now time for our plays of the week, and we've got 3 from this past week, including the Greensburg Central Catholic boys. And while the week was marred by a tough loss on Thursday, the Centurions opened the playoffs with an emphatic win at home against Laurel. The highlight of that dominant first quarter was Samir Crosby's pinpoint pass to Spring Brady O'Rourke for a layup, with Jack and John Bainbridge calling the sequence.
That's a big factor. I think Central has a little bit of a size advantage.
O'Rourke, beautiful feed by Crosby. Talk about fitting that one through a window. And it's an early 4-0 lead for the Centurions.
His QB ability comes through there by Crosby.
And despite the loss by GCC, I mean, still an unbelievable season and a fantastic play by Samir Crosby. I don't know how he got that through, Sean. I watched back to it 3 or 4 times and I said, how did he get that through? It's a small window.
It was a very small window indeed. We continue plays of the week with the Jeannette boys, and Kimani Brown was paramount in the Jayhawks' comeback against Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, including his pickpocket and layup, plus the foul during Jeanette's late surge, with Jack and Anthony D'Annunzio captioning the action.
McCullough, poked and prodded by Brown. Gets it off to Grisafi.
A couple times they have left that shot open on that side of the court.
Brown, a chance to tie at the line.
And he gets fouled. Wow.
Don't ever count out the gentleman from Jeannette. Man, oh man, backs against the wall, doesn't matter. Kimani Brown, his shoulders the size of Western PA, carrying the load.
Truly, it felt like there was maybe 2 plays before that was leading up to this play, but this is what changed everything. This gave Jeannette completely new life, and they never looked back from there, and they wound up winning in what truly was a thriller, Sean.
We wrap up plays of the week with the Seton Hill University women's team, and I'm sure you must have seen this by now. The Griffins had an overtime win for the ages against IUP last Wednesday. It was Hallie Cowan's improbable shot that made it all possible. Her buzzer beater at the end of regulation nearly brought the roof off the McKenna Center, with myself on the call.
And they do, by the way, give it to him in the front court here. So Seton Hill's 4 triggers it in. Kalish down to 3. Cowan, she's going to have to heave it for the tie. Gets it to go! That looked like it was good, but my oh my was that close. If it counts, we're headed to overtime.
My oh my, that was a fun one. That's not how you draw it up necessarily, but sometimes you just need a player to say, screw it, I'm going to make a play no matter what. And
Hail Mary heave, my friend. Absolutely.
Yeah, that shot, about as difficult as it gets in a pressure moment, she delivered, and then of course it just felt like it was fait accompli at that point, that the Griffins with that momentum were going to find a way to win against the Crimson Hawks in overtime, and they did just that. Well, it's now time for our team of the week, and Jack, this is a team that I think we probably could have picked just about any week all season long, with maybe one exception. The Greensburg Central Catholic Centurions girls, they are now headed to a championship. They won in Class 2A last year. They're now in 3A. They're going against a team in Shadyside Academy that they're 0-2 against, but they're 20-3 against the rest of their schedule this season, including some impressive victories. A dominant win against Our Lady of the Sacred Heart on Saturday, 41-18. You rarely see a type of score like that in the semifinals. They also knocked off Quaker Valley, which has just a dominant interior force in Mimi Thero. They opened their postseason with a lopsided win against Brownsville, where they more than doubled up the Falcons. This team feels like it's rolling right now, and I know it's going to be a stiff challenge for them to try to knock off Shadyside for the first time this year, but it does feel like they might be playing their best ball at the right time of year.
I always say and really, I feel like it's one of the, I don't want to say a cliche, but kind of something that's very true in sports. It's hard to beat a team a third time around in the same season. And you look at that first game against Shadyside Academy for GCC. an outlier game, truly an outlier game.
It was kind of a blowout, right?
It was a true blowout. I think it was a 30-point blowout. If I'm not mistaken, it got into the mercy rule territory. And that was just a game where, Erica Gribble had 9 points. They were just completely out of sorts. You come back to the second game at GCC, they play considerably better, and they still lose. And mind you, they had chances to win.
That game was tied heading to the fourth quarter.
And I remember mentioning that their biggest thing for Shadyside Academy was that their third and fourth options were stepping up. And like I mentioned earlier about Belle Vernon having some of their third options stepping up for the boys, this is what's happened for GCC girls during the playoff run. Avery Jones has been kind of this bright and shining star that's emerged as the third option because teams have tried to take out Jayla Peterson, obviously taking out Erica Gribble. And this is what happened against Ulsh. It was the Chargers focusing on Peterson and Gribble, and then Jones has this sneaky 14 points, and that's a major difference. You go back to the game before against Quaker Valley. She had 10 points in the quarterfinal game. So the fact that they've got a third option now that's becoming comfortable, playing in this big moment, playing some big basketball, mind you, and stepping up to the plate, if I'm Shadyside Academy, I don't know how confident, obviously you feel confident, but I don't know how comfortable I would feel going up against this GCC team a third time around because, again, trying to beat a team a third time is hard. I know that I think Karis Thomas had, if I'm not mistaken, 46 points in the semifinal game.
Yeah, she's ridiculous right now.
Incredible. Again, though, as we've seen with teams that take out Erica Gribble from GCC, if you take Karis Thomas out of the equation and force some of the other options, I think then all of a sudden it's even playing field. But again, I think right now for GCC, they're rolling. They've got a lot of momentum behind them. And if Avery Jones keeps being that third option, it's going to be, I think, a handful for the Bulldogs to slow down the Centurions offense.
And to win a championship last year, even though they had an immensely talented roster, by the way, their third option last year was also an Avery. It was Avery Davis, who has since moved on. But even if you have a talented roster, to have this success, a lot of it is because the coach is doing a really good job. And Chris Scattell has proven both in Class 2A and now in 3A that he can find a way to kind of outwit some of the best. He's going to have to be at his best as well to try to figure out the Bulldogs a third time around. I'm sure he'll come up with something different, but he deserves a lot of credit for where this team is. Again, they are 20-5. They're outscoring their opponents on average nearly 59-32. So, it's just really just been dominant all season long.
Yeah. You say that margin and it's mind boggling. You're looking at basically in that sense, almost every game is a mercy rule game, again, save one or two. So, and again, props to Coach Scattell, the fact that he's, and again, we got to remember, Sean, they jumped from 2A to 3A and it's been pretty seamless, I would have to say. It's been a seamless transition for them for the most part. Again, the two games against Shadyside Academy, that again, you look at that second game, Sean, you maybe look at it and say GCC legitimately had a chance to win. They could have one loss under their belt. The one game against Shadyside, you throw that away. Everybody's got a game like that every year. But, I think that this is a team that, again, knows how to win big games. Championship caliber program, championship caliber coach. It's going to be a really good game on Thursday. I got to tell you, man, that Thursday is going to be a fun one with Belle Vernon as well in the championship. Those are two really good championship games that are going to be played.
And as good as Erica Gribble is scoring the basketball, I think her defense might be the most important aspect for the Centurions if they're going to find a way to win a championship. She's been getting after it, covering some of the best players. She'll likely have another big task in front of her on Thursday. All right, well, speaking of Thursday, Jack, we have a much lighter schedule because most of the teams in Westmoreland County have seen their season come to an end, but we already have two teams in the championship. We have two more that could be in the championship. They're in the semifinals, that being Jeannette and then Norwin girls. And then we have several teams in the consolation trying to improve their seeding because they've already secured a spot in the state playoffs. So let's look ahead. Monday, the game you and I will have a broadcast of, Fox Chapel High School, Jeannette, Sewickley Academy, a great 2 versus 3 matchup in the 2A bracket. Winner moves on to the championship. We also will have consolation games, Penn-Trafford at Uniontown, Greater Latrobe at Moon, Elwood City at Southmoreland. Wednesday, Our Lady of the Sacred Heart at Greensburg Central Catholic. That is, of course, a consolation game in Class 2A. And then the championship Thursday, Belle Vernon area and Newcastle. a Trojans team's absolutely rolling, but of course the great storyline with Joe Salvino and Belle Vernon and that senior laden team. That will be a broadcast that our plan is to do audio broadcast of all of our Westmoreland County teams that make it to the championships at the Pete. So the plan is that we will be bringing audio broadcast of Belle Vernon against North Catholic. Girls action Tuesday. We will have this one on our network, WSM. Norwin against Cannon McMillan. The Knights swept the two in the regular season. The Big Macs certainly have made it interesting. We mentioned that section extremely impressive. All four of the teams out of that section, Section 2, went on to win and advance to the semifinals. Also that night, Baldwin at Penn-Trafford in a consolation game. And we already know Thursday, Greensburg Central Catholic, Shady Side Academy down at the Pete. Somewhat fortuitously, I guess, for us here at WSN, 7 o'clock scheduled time is the GCC game. 9 o'clock is Belle Vernon. So we will have our Westmoreland County teams back-to-back down at the Pete. Also, college action this week. Postseason in the PAC, St. Vincent College at Grove City on the women's side. Wednesday, Pitt Johnstown at Seton Hill, a doubleheader in PSAC action. We will have that broadcast on WSN. And then Saturday, Seton Hill wraps up the regular season in Erie against Gannon for a men's and women's doubleheader. Jack, what jumps out to you?
Championships, my friend. Belle Vernon, GCC, those two have got them highlighted. I'm also excited to see Baldwin and Penn-Trafford girls. You know, how does Penn-Trafford kind of keep things going without, getting too caught up in the loss against TJ? And then also for Penn-Trafford boys against Uniontown. I think that'll be a fun game because, the Warriors, they had a shot, Sean, to move on. They had a legitimate chance. I think it was.
Yeah, we should note that they just missed the cut for one of the biggest stories. They upset the number 2 seed Baldwin Highlanders. Now they did fall subsequent to that, so their championship run came to an end. But they're in the state playoffs, and they go against the Uniontown team that they played very competitively earlier this season as section foes. So that's already a successful season, in my estimation, for Penn-Trafford boys.
Absolutely, and again, the fact they were beating Mars pretty handedly in the beginning, wound up losing, but. Still, you look at it retrospectively, they could be very well playing in a semifinal situation. And then
very quick opportunity, by the way, Jack. PAC basketball, I know you're all about it, so let's talk about the Bearcats. The men are in as well, but they're awaiting their opponent. Is that correct?
Yes. So they will wait the winner of W&J and Franciscan on Tuesday, and they've got a first-round bye. They'll play Thursday at home. But St. Vincent Grove City women should be a fun game because I know that Grove City's kind of gone like this. St. Vincent's kind of gone up and down a little bit recently. I think those two are going to match up really, really well. But I think the St. Vincent men, they've got a chance to make a run at a championship. That's a legitimate team that Coach D.P. Harris has this season. And then obviously Seton Hill. Hey, can the magic continue for the women's? What an unbelievable run they've been on, especially without Christian Fry. That's what's been so unbelievable about it.
At Greensburg men also in the playoffs. I believe the number 2 seed out of the AMCC, so they get a bye. So they don't know who they're playing yet, but they know that they're going to be in the semifinals in that conference as well. Well, we mentioned this has been a very fun and very busy week, and now we have the culmination of the entire WPIAL season for Westmoreland County. 2 teams already guaranteed into the championships on Thursday. If Jeannette wins, the Jayhawks will play Friday. If the Norwin girls win, they will play Saturday at the Peak. So the possibility to expand 2 championship games up to 4 here in Westmoreland County. Fingers crossed that happens. And if we have a good enough week, Jack, I guess we'll be back next week to talk about all of it here on this show. But if this is the final time, it's been a really fun season. Hopefully we got at least one more ahead of us, depending on how things play out. Of course, not only can you watch this episode and all the previous ones back on our YouTube channel, but you want to check out the website for articles, for all the video interviews that we have up there as well. And of course, the live game broadcast. We will have several of them this week. We mentioned Jeannette on Monday, Norwin on Tuesday, couple championships on Thursday. Fingers crossed that we get a couple more on Friday and Saturday. That'll do it for this edition. For my colleague Jack Ryden, our Sean Myers signing off. You have been tuning in to the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.